Hello, Adrian. Welcome.
Hi, Leah. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us all the way from Hong Kong in the very late evening. We were just talking moments ago about this lovely, I guess, is that a photo or a painting in the background? Where is
Pretty
that?
sure, pretty sure it's a painting somewhere in Hong Kong.
Okay, so this is a grounding us in where you are, even though we're indoors, but we actually are sampling a bit of the location of where you're at. Perfect.
Yeah, I
So,
tried to put the camera to the background, which is the iconic Victoria Harbour, but then
oh, we
reflection
might
and
get a
all
bit
that.
of we might get a bit of the lighting shining back at us. I would love to just introduce you to our audience today. And Adrian and I, we go back a very long way. I think probably to the start of your career just after you graduated. So I knew Adrian in our time working together in a technology sales role. And I remember, Adrian, you blew me away because of your background in music. I remember you talked about how you set up this like orchestra piece, and I think you're a natural talent when it comes to that. But even then, I've always been amazed by sort of how adaptable you are, and the fact that you actually, we were even though in a technology sales company, you had a background in engineering. And then of course you made a bigger change even after I left and you had stayed on. But so I would love to actually have you share that journey with people on this who are going to be watching this, especially for those lawyers out there, because I'm sure they'd be shocked with the journey of where you went and how you eventually ended up in the legal industry. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Sure, no problem. I mean, you mentioned music. Yeah, I from when I was in high school, I was already kind of torn. I have interest in a lot of things, so I've always I was torn when it was time to choosing a uni. I obviously went to the US for high school, and back then I had a few choices whether to go into engineering, go into art. I was also considering a career in architecture. Although my architect friends told me that I probably made a good call not to go there. No offense to the architect audience. And also music. I was offered a scholarship to attend one of the music colleges in the US, but ultimately I chose engineering out of interest and, well, to be honest, pragmatically out of earning potential for what I thought it would be. Anyway, so I ended up doing a degree in material engineering in London, and I even got a master degree for it. But um, then I made a slight move in terms of career path when I joined, obviously, Leah um, at a tech company as in a sales role. Um, that transition is much less interesting. It's more out of a necessity, simply because back in the day, when I graduated from uni, it was the GFC, or at least the tail end of the GFC. So there back then, the UK government implemented a whole series of rather anti-immigration policy, which resulted in it being practically impossible to get a work visa in the UK as an engineering and as an engineer anyway, because of they basically set a threshold for salary for getting a work visa. So and they also cancelled or suspended the non-sponsored visa. So that made it much more difficult for me to stay in the UK to work as an engineer. So I came back to Asia with an engineering degree, which not very much appreciated, especially in Hong Kong, where most companies don't need a material scientist or engineer. So
Hmm.
I ended up, trying to find my path, or what's available, what's the available option, etc. And I happened to meet Leah in a career fair, and I got and I thought what she did back then in the company that hired the both of us was very interesting. That's why I gave it a shot, and then spent almost a year. I think a year at Leah's old shop. It was quite interesting, quite an interesting experience. I get to live in Shanghai, get to practice my Mandarin, which was a big boon, and basically just experience what the real world is like. But then after a year, it's time for some reflection and self-reflection, and I ended up thinking that I would have a better progression or development, career development progression if I go do something else. So that's when I considered making my move. Now, out of all my interests back then, I never thought I would choose law. But back then, I don't know, back then it seemed like a natural combination of my engineering background and a BD and a more BD consultancy role that I had, simply because a lawyer, having a lawyer would require logical skills, which I would gain from my studies, and then my BD role, consultancy role, giving advices, doing BD networking, etc. Those skills are invaluable as a lawyer. So that's how I came to the conclusion that I should maybe give law a try. So I started doing my research, and ultimately went back to the UK to do my law conversion. So that's kind of my thought process back then. Obviously, again, I know I mentioned that before, but the earning potential is also a consideration, obviously.
So you had a firm eye on sort of like what the return would be. But it's amazing that you talk about engineering and then BD, and the intersection of it for you was legal. Most people don't draw that conclusion, but I love how you said, okay, the best of this and the best of this gets me to the legal part.
That part of the thought process was started on with basically the company that Lee and I worked for. They were in a bit of a legal trouble back then, with patents, intellectual property, etc., litigation all across the world, especially in the US and the UK. I chanced upon that, and then read a bit more and found that a lot of the lawyers handling that case had an engineering background, and it helps because doing patent law, doing intellectual property law requires a certain appreciation of engineering or technology. Being able to read scientific papers is a big plus. So
yeah,
I thought, okay, law, I've never considered that, but maybe that could be an option. And then I started looking into it.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know which legal case you're referring to, and I'm intrigued that it inspired you because that was big for the business back then.
I met the partner who was doing the English litigation.
Wow, okay.